Today on All About Adoption, I'm going to talk about the frequently asked questions that I receive. So if we have not met, I'm Steffany A. I am the founder and executive director here at Adoption Beyond, and I'm so glad you decided to join me today. So let's dive right into these questions. Question number 1, how long will it take to be able to receive a child through adoption? That is the question of the year. Everybody wants to know this, and there is no concrete answer because it is not the agency or the adoption professionals that you're working with who make this decision. It is the expecting moms or expecting parents that we're working with who make those decisions. And it's just being in the right place at the right time for the right expecting mom to find you. Now, do I believe that there is an expecting mom that's just perfect for you and your family? Yes, I do believe that. But I don't know when that mom is going to come into your life, and neither does anybody else. So that is something that is very difficult. Now, there's things that you can do to improve your opportunities of finding that mom a little sooner. That is to be able to work with more than one adoption professional. Also, doing your own outreach as well. Now, if you're adopting internationally, it's really going to depend on the country. With the country, it's a little more clear about what your time frame may be, because usually adoption processes are just basically the processes of paperwork through the country and the different legal channels through the country before you are referred a child that you would hope to adopt. So you may find international adoption has a little more clear of a path in terms of the time frame, but domestically there is no time frame. But most families adopt within 2 years, and some will adopt even faster. It just depends on how much effort you put into making sure you are out there and available for an expecting mom to find you. Another common question that we get is, how often do expecting moms change their mind about their adoption plan and don't follow through with placing their child for adoption? Now, I've heard all kinds of different numbers for this. As an agency, less than 3% of our birth moms change their mind. But nationally, I've heard anywhere from 25% all the way up to 50%. So I think that really has to do more with the adoption professionals that you choose to work with and what adoption situations they have come across there and through their agency. So overall, usually it's right around a good number to go by is that 25% of the adoptions don't work out. So what that means is that 75% of the times it does. Now, when you're in that 25%, it's devastating, and it is devastating on all different levels. But just know that when you go into adoptions, it's more often than not going to work out than not work out. And just because you have a failed adoption doesn't mean that you're never going to adopt. You may need to go through a couple of failed adoptions before you have a successful one. Some families never go through a failed adoption. So it just depends on the right situation coming along for you and how much of the professional that you're working with has screened the expecting mom. So with international adoptions, the children have already been are free and available for adoption. So you don't necessarily have to worry about an expecting mom changing their mind in an international adoption. The risk that you have with international is that a country shuts down. Like, for example, everything was perfectly fine in Ukraine with adoptions until Russia attacked Ukraine, and now there are no adoptions happening. So you just never know internationally what could possibly happen within that country to make adoptions discontinue. With embryo adoptions, as the recording of this, it usually takes less than a year to be able to get matched because there are more embryos available than families wanting to adopt embryos. And a lot of that just has to do with a couple of things. One, people are just unaware of embryo adoptions. And number two, most of the times when people have come to adoption, they're done with anything that remotely resembles infertility. They don't want to go there. They're done medically trying to build their family. So sometimes families don't even come back to embryo because they've already crossed that path and leaving infertility into adoption and see embryo more as an infertility treatment than an adoption treatment. Will we receive medical and background and family background on the child? If you're adopting domestically, then the answer most likely is yes, because you're working with an expecting parent who is voluntarily choosing to place their child for adoption. So you're going to have medical information and background information from them. Now, will you have information on the birth father? Possibly not, because not a lot of the birth fathers are involved in the adoption process, and therefore their information is missing, or it's an unknown birth father, or there's multiple birth fathers and we're not sure which one is the father to get that information from, because DNA testing is not always done in every adoption process. Now, internationally, it just depends. The children usually are typically abandoned in international adoption. So for some countries, you won't have information until that child would enter the orphanage. And then at that point in time, you would have information about the child. Some countries, it's just like a domestic adoption where the expecting parent relinquished the child. And in those countries, you would have medical information about the child. Embryo adoption, you're going to have a lot of information. You're going to have a lot of genetic and family background information. And one of the bigger and final questions I'm going to talk about today is, what is the cost of adoptions? And wow, that is a fantastic question and something you really need to know before you start. It just depends. It depends on the avenue of adoption that you pursue. So with an agency adoption domestically, it could be anywhere from $25,000 all the way up to $70,000, depending on the agency that you're going to be working with. If you're going to be working with a consultant, most consultants work with agencies that are anywhere from $35,000 to $55,000, $60,000. When you're doing a private adoption, also known as an independent or outreach or self-networking, you're going to have somewhere between probably $10,000 to $14,000. Then when you're working with an embryo, it depends on whether you are successful in becoming pregnant the first time that you do an embryo adoption. So your adoption could be right around $9,000 to $12,000. If you're doing an adoption through foster care, the majority of the time it is free to adopt from foster care. And because even if there are costs involved with foster care, generally children from foster care come with what's called a subsidy, which covers any costs that you may have had out of pocket. So thus making foster care free in the majority of the states that you adopt from. And then, and even if there is a cost, it's as nominal as $1,000, maybe $2,000 at the most. Then international adoptions is anywhere from $25,000 to $55,000. So, in terms of the cost difference between international and domestic, there's not a cost difference as there used to be 10, 12 years ago. And so those are kind of the ranges. So it just really just depends on the kind of adoption you're pursuing to what the costs are going to be. And also choosing who you're going to work with will also vary on the cost as well. So any words of wisdom I'm going to part you with is that it's just really important to be very flexible in the adoption process, patient, and prepare for the unexpected. And go into adoption with an open heart and an open mind. And those are my pieces of advice on having the best adoption experience possible. So I hope you like this video. I would encourage you to hit the subscribe button below, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks. Bye.